The vast halls of the Galactic Science Academy buzzed with activity as beings from 100 different worlds moved through their daily routines. Amid the chaos of floating data screens and hovering research pods, Reed stood at her workstation, her slim fingers dancing across holographic controls. Another normal day of being completely invisible to everyone around her. A tall, tentacled researcher brushed past her workspace, its appendages passing right through her equipment as if it wasn't there. Reed didn't flinch. She was used to it by now. Her instruments, her research, her very existence seemed to occupy a different layer of reality that no one else could perceive. Quantum entanglement readings are stable, she muttered to herself, recording the data. After 15 years at the academy, talking to herself had become a habit. Her voice didn't reach anyone's ears anyway. The laboratory's main door slid open with a soft hiss. Director Thorne, a crystalline being whose body sparkled with internal light, floated in. Reed watched as he addressed the room. The Quantum Communications Project needs results by the end of this cycle. Our funding depends on it. Reed's hand tightened on her datapad. She had solved the quantum communication problem 3 months ago. The solution was elegant, beautiful even, based on her observations of how quantum particles behaved in ways that defied the Academy's current understanding. But like everything else she did, her reports vanished into the void, unread and unnoticed. She looked down at her pale blue hands, so similar to many humanoid species in the galaxy, yet somehow fundamentally different. Reed had long ago given up trying to understand why no one could see her. She had tried everything. Shouting, throwing things, standing in people's paths. Nothing worked. Objects she touched remained visible to others. But the moment she let go, everyone forgot they existed. The afternoon cycle brought more frustration as Reed watched her colleagues struggle with equations she had solved years ago. A group of researchers huddled around a quantum projection table, arguing about signal degradation in faster-than-light communications. "The particle spin is the key," one of them said, pointing at a rotating model. "If we could just stabilize it." "You're looking at it backwards," Reed said out of habit, walking over to their table. "The instability is the solution, not the problem." She reached for the controls, adjusting the model to demonstrate. The researchers stared right through her at the changing display. "That's odd," a younger scientist said. "The model's behaving strangely." "Must be a glitch," another replied, resetting the system. Reed's demonstration vanished, replaced by their original flawed model. As the day cycle drew to a close, Reed sat alone in the darkened lab. Stars twinkled through the massive observation window, their light traveling unimaginable distances to reach her eyes. Sometimes she wondered if she was the only one of her kind, this strange being that existed outside everyone's perception. But she knew better. In her quarters, hidden in a private database that no one else would ever access, she kept records of others like her. Glimpses caught in security feeds, shadows in crowded spaces, unexplained phenomena that pointed to the existence of her people. They were out there, scattered across the galaxy, equally alone in their invisibility. Reed gathered her personal datapad and headed toward her quarters. The night shift workers passed through the corridors, some walking right through her as if she were a ghost. In a way, she supposed she was, present but unseen, affecting the world but never truly part of it. Tomorrow would be another day of watching, recording, and adding to her collection of unified quantum theories that no one would ever read. But Reed had long ago decided that being unseen didn't make her discoveries any less real or important. The universe's secrets were out there, waiting to be understood, whether anyone else knew she was uncovering them or not. As she reached her quarters, a notification flashed across the Academy's public screens. Earth diplomatic mission arriving tomorrow. First human representatives to join Academy research staff. Reed barely glanced at it. New species came to the Academy all the time. Why should these humans be any different? Little did she know, everything was about to change. The arrival of the human delegation brought an unusual energy to the Academy. Reed watched from her usual corner as the newcomers were led through the main atrium. Their species looked remarkably similar to many humanoid races, though their movements seemed more animated, their expressions more open. One of them, a tall male with dark hair and alert eyes, caught her attention. James Miller, according to the floating nameplate above his credentials. While the other humans marveled at the Academy's architecture, he kept glancing around as if searching for something. Later that day, Reed worked at her quantum interface station, running her daily experiments. The lab had been cleared for the human scientists to set up their equipment, and James Miller was assigned to the station next to hers. She paid him little attention at first, focused on adjusting the quantum field parameters. It wasn't until she heard his sharp intake of breath that she looked up. He was staring directly at her. Reed froze. Not in her direction, not through her, but at her. His eyes were fixed on her face with an expression of surprise and curiosity. "Hello," he said, taking a careful step forward. "I've been seeing you around all day. Why doesn't anyone else notice you?" Reed's datapad clattered to the floor. For the first time in years, her hands were shaking. You can see me." "Of course I can see you." James frowned, looking around at the other researchers who continued their work, completely oblivious to their conversation. "Though it's pretty clear no one else can. How is that possible?" Reed struggled to find words. After years of talking to herself, having an actual conversation felt strange. "I don't know. It's been this way as long as I can remember. No one has ever seen me before. No one has spoken to me in 15 years. James's eyes widened. 15 years. That's... He ran a hand through his hair, processing the information. "That's horrible. How have you survived?" "The Academy systems still recognize my credentials. I can access my quarters, use the facilities, conduct research. I just can't interact with anyone." Reed found herself fighting back tears. "Until now." A researcher walked between them, passing right through Reed as if she were a hologram. James jumped back in shock. "That's incredible and disturbing. Are you some kind of quantum ghost?" "I'm as physical as you are," Reed said, picking up her fallen datapad. "I can touch things, move objects. But the moment I let go of something, people forget it was ever moved. It's like their minds can't process my existence or my actions." James pulled out his own research tablet, his scientific curiosity clearly sparked. "Would you mind if I ran some scans? Maybe there's something about human perception that's different from other species." For the next few hours, they worked together, running basic tests. James confirmed that his instruments could detect her, but when he showed the readings to another researcher, they saw nothing but background noise. "This is fascinating," James said, reviewing the data. "It's like you exist in a quantum state that most species' brains automatically filter out. But for some reason, human brains process the information differently." Reed felt hope rising in her chest for the first time in years. "Does this mean, could there be a way to make others see me too?" "I don't know," James admitted, "but I want to help you find out." He glanced at the time display. "The evening briefing will start soon. We should meet somewhere private to discuss this further. This could be huge, not just for you, but for understanding consciousness and quantum mechanics." "My private lab," Reed suggested. "No one else ever goes there. I can show you all my research, everything I've discovered about quantum communications while working here unseen." James nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. "Tonight then." "And Reed." He gave her a warm smile. "I promise you won't have to be alone anymore." As she watched him leave for his briefing, Reed felt the weight of 15 years of isolation beginning to lift. Whatever happened next, she was no longer invisible to everyone. For the first time in her memory, someone else knew she existed. And that changed everything. Reed's private laboratory hummed with energy as she showed James her years of accumulated research. Holographic displays filled the room with swirling quantum equations and data streams that made his eyes widen. "This is incredible," James said, studying the particularly complex formula. You've solved problems that our best scientists are still struggling with. This quantum communication theory alone could revolutionize interstellar travel. It's based on how I perceive reality, Reed explained, bringing up another display. When you exist outside normal observation, you start to see how quantum particles truly behave. They're not random at all. They follow patterns that only become visible when you're like me. James looked up from the data. About that, I've been cross-referencing historical databases. I think I found something about your people. He pulled out his tablet, projecting a star chart. There are records of a civilization that vanished about 5,000 years ago. The Veiled Ones, they were called. Reed moved closer to the projection, her heart racing. What happened to them? According to the records, they were facing extinction. A nearby star was about to go supernova, threatening their home system. James expanded the map, showing the stellar event. The records say they were working on some kind of quantum-based defensive technology, but then they just disappeared. Everyone assumed they died when the star exploded. But they didn't die, Reed whispered. They succeeded. They shifted themselves out of normal perception. A perfect defense. You can't be harmed by what can't detect you exist. James nodded slowly. But something went wrong, didn't it? The change became permanent. Instead of saving them, it trapped them in isolation. Reed sat down heavily in her chair. All this time, I thought I was cursed or damaged somehow. But it was survival. Our ancestors chose this existence to save our species. The question is, James said, why can humans see you when no one else can? What's different about our brains? They spent the next few hours running tests, comparing human neural patterns to those of other species. Reed's instruments, calibrated to her unique quantum state, revealed something fascinating. Look at this, she pointed to a neural scan. Human brains process quantum information in a completely different way. Where other species' minds automatically filter out quantum uncertainties, human consciousness seems to embrace them. That's why we can see you, James realized. Your people exist in a quantum state of uncertainty, both here and not here. Other species' brains automatically collapse that uncertainty by choosing not here. But human brains, your minds allow both states to exist simultaneously, Reed finished. You see the uncertainty itself. James paced the lab, thinking. This could be the key to helping your people. If we can understand how human brains process quantum states, we might be able to help other species perceive you too. Would my people even want that? Reed asked quietly. After 5,000 years of isolation, maybe they've adapted to this existence. Maybe they prefer it. There's only one way to find out, James said. We need to find them. There must be others like you, hidden among every population in the galaxy. With human help, we could locate them, communicate with them. Reed felt a mix of excitement and fear. If we succeed, it would change everything. Not just for my people, but for our understanding of consciousness itself. And no one should have to live invisible, James added softly. No one should be alone like you've been. Reed looked at her quantum equations floating in the air. For years, these discoveries had been her only companions. Now, finally, she had someone to share them with. Someone who could see her, hear her, understand her work. Where do we start? She asked. James smiled. First, we document everything. Your equations, our findings about human perception, the historical records. Then we design experiments to prove our theories. And most importantly, he added, we find a way to make others see what I can see. Reed nodded, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. The truth about her people was finally emerging from the quantum shadows, and somehow, the human had been the key to unlocking it all. Their work was just beginning. 3 weeks of intense research had led Reed and James to this moment. Standing before the entrance to what appeared to be an abandoned sector of the Academy's residential wing, Reed's hands trembled slightly. Are you sure about this? James asked, checking his modified quantum scanner. if you're not ready. No, they need to know they're not alone anymore. Reed took a deep breath. I've watched them for years, you know. Never approaching, never making contact. Just observing from a distance. She placed her hand on a seemingly blank wall, and a hidden door shimmered into existence. James blinked in surprise as Reed led him through. The corridor beyond was filled with shimmering quantum distortions that his human eyes could barely process. "Welcome to my people's sanctuary," Reed said softly. The space opened into a vast chamber that defied the Academy's normal architecture. Hundreds of Reed's people moved through the area, their forms partially transparent to James's vision. Children played in quantum-shifted playgrounds. Adults worked at stations that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, and elders sat in circles, their hands moving in complex patterns as they communicated. "There are so many," James whispered, awestruck. "How do they maintain all this?" "We've learned to manipulate the quantum nature of reality," Reed explained. "This entire space exists in a probability wave, both here and not here. We've been living among other species for millennia, building our own world in the spaces between what they can perceive." A group of children ran past, their laughter sounding like distant wind chimes to James's ears. One small girl stopped, staring at him with wide eyes. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing. "They can see you," Reed said, watching as more of her people began to notice James's presence. "You're the first outsider they've ever been able to interact with." An elder approached them, his form more stable than the others. "I am Guide," he said, his voice carrying an odd resonance. "We have watched your research with great interest, Reed. Bringing a human here is unprecedented." "He can help us," Reed said firmly. "Humans process quantum information differently. They might be the key to ending our isolation." The elder studied James intently. "Our ancestors chose this path to survive. The galaxy was not ready for our understanding of quantum reality. Perhaps it still isn't." "With respect," James said, "isolation isn't the only way to survive anymore. Humanity would welcome your knowledge, your perspective. We could learn from each other." More of Reed's people gathered around them, their forms flickering with interest and concern. James activated his scanner, showing them the neural pattern comparisons. "Look," he explained, "human brains naturally accept quantum uncertainty. We could help develop technology that lets other species perceive you too. Not by changing you, but by helping them see what we see." The elder raised his hand, and complex patterns of light danced between his fingers. "Our children have never known any other existence. Some of us have lived entire lives unseen, unheard. To change now would be a choice," Reed finished. "Just as our ancestors chose this path to survive, we can choose a new path to thrive. We don't have to hide anymore." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd, their forms shifting with emotion. James watched in fascination as quantum patterns rippled through the air, carrying meaning he couldn't quite grasp. "The human speaks truth," the elder finally said, "but such a change cannot be rushed. We must proceed carefully, testing your theories before exposing our existence to the galaxy." Reed nodded. "We'll continue our research, develop the technology properly. When we're ready, each of our people can decide for themselves whether to become visible to others." James looked around at the hidden world these people had built, marveling at their resilience and ingenuity. "Your understanding of quantum mechanics could transform science as we know it. But more importantly, no child should have to grow up invisible to the world around them." The elder gestured, and the quantum distortions in the air formed into a complex equation. "Then let us begin. Together, we will find a way to bridge the quantum divide between our peoples." As Reed and James left the hidden colony, they carried with them not just hope, but a responsibility. The truth about Reed's people would soon emerge, and the galaxy would never be the same. The experimental chamber hummed with energy as Reed and James made final adjustments to their quantum resonance device. After months of research, countless failures, and breakthrough after breakthrough, They were ready for the first full test. Neural pattern synchronization at 80%, James reported, checking the readings. The quantum field is stable. He looked at the small group gathered in the chamber, 3 of Reed's people and 2 other human scientists he'd carefully selected to help. The device should temporarily align other species' neural patterns with human quantum perception, Reed explained, her form flickering slightly with nervous energy. If it works, anyone within range should be able to see us, just as humans do. The test subject, a young member of Reed's people named Trace, stood in the center of the room. Above him, the device they'd built looked like a suspended crystal, pulsing with internal light. Remember, James warned, if anything feels wrong, we shut it down immediately. We're not taking any risks. Trace nodded, his form shifting between visibility states in James's vision. I'm ready. My whole life, I've wondered what it would be like to be seen, to be heard, to be real to others. You've always been real, Reed said softly. We're just helping others see that reality. James activated the device. The crystal began to spin, creating a cascade of quantum fields that rippled through the air. Trace's form started to stabilize, the usual quantum fluctuations slowing until... I can see him, one of the human scientists gasped. I mean, I could see him before, but now it's clearer, more solid. Trace looked down at his hands, watching as they became fully visible, no longer shifting between states. It feels strange, but not uncomfortable. James checked the readings. Neural patterns are holding steady. No sign of quantum destabilization. He tapped his communicator, bringing in the non-human observer. The door slid open, and a senior Academy researcher entered, a crystalline being who had worked with James for months. The researcher stopped, staring at Trace with all their sensory facets. Extraordinary, they chimed. I can perceive a life form where moments ago there was nothing. How is this possible? The device is synchronizing your quantum perception with human neural patterns, James explained. It's allowing you to process quantum uncertainty the way we do naturally. Reed moved closer to the crystalline being. Can you see me as well? Yes. Another one. The researcher's crystal body flickered with excitement. This defies everything we thought we knew about perception and reality. The test continued for an hour, bringing in observers of different species. Each one could clearly see Trace and the other members of Reed's people in the room. The device worked perfectly, with no negative effects on either the observers or the observed. Finally, James powered down the crystal. The non-human observers blinked as their perception returned to normal, Trace and the others fading from their view. The quantum resonance field is stable and reproducible, James announced, reviewing the data. We can scale up the device to cover larger areas. With enough power, we could potentially affect entire sections of the Academy. Reed studied the results on her own screen. The neural pattern adjustments are temporary in observers, but completely safe. Each person's brain returns to normal processing once outside the field. This changes everything, Trace said, still looking at his hands, though they had returned to their quantum-shifted state. Our people could choose when to be seen, where to be visible. We could interact with the galaxy on our own terms. We'll need to proceed carefully, James cautioned. Present our findings to both your Council of Guides and the Academy leadership. This technology could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Reed placed her hand on the deactivated device. For generations, my people have lived in the shadows of reality, watching but never participating. Now we have a choice: remain hidden or step into the light. Whatever your people decide, James said, you've proven that isolation isn't the only way to exist. There's a place for you in the broader galaxy. As they began documenting their success, Reed felt a profound sense of change approaching. The barrier between her people and the rest of the universe wasn't gone, but for the first time in 5,000 years, it was no longer impenetrable. The next step would be the hardest: revealing the truth to the galaxy at large. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on James as he stood at the central podium. Behind him, Reed waited invisibly, her heart racing. Distinguished members of the council, James began, what I'm about to show you will challenge everything you believe about consciousness, quantum physics, and the nature of reality itself. He activated a holoprojector, displaying their research data. 5,000 years ago, a civilization faced extinction. Instead of perishing, they evolved, or rather, engineered themselves, into a quantum state of existence that has kept them hidden among us ever since. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A counselor from the crystalline worlds rose. These are bold claims, human James. Where is your evidence? James smiled. I'm glad you asked. He pressed a control, activating the scaled-up version of their quantum resonance device. The massive crystal array hidden in the chamber's ceiling hummed to life. Reed took her cue, stepping forward. As the quantum field washed over the chamber, she watched thousands of alien eyes suddenly focus on her. The silence was deafening. Greetings, honored council, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. My name is Reed. For 15 years, I've worked at your academy, made discoveries, advanced our understanding of quantum physics, all while being completely invisible to you. The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors jumped from their seats, sensors were drawn, and security protocols activated. James raised his hands. Please, remain calm. What you're seeing is completely safe. The quantum field is simply allowing you to perceive what humans can naturally see. The head counselor, a being of pure energy, floated down to their level. This is unprecedented. How many of your people exist among us? Reed gestured, and dozens of her people emerged from the crowd. They had been there all along, invisible observers until now. Scientists, artists, historians, all of them stepping into view for the first time. We are the Veiled Ones, Reed explained. We've lived alongside you for millennia, unable to interact, unable to share our knowledge or join your communities. Until humanity arrived, we were completely alone in a crowded galaxy. She activated her own display, showing their research. Humans process quantum uncertainty differently than other species. Their brains accept multiple states of reality simultaneously. This device temporarily grants that same ability to others. The implications are staggering, a Science Council member said, examining the data. Your quantum physics understanding could advance our technology by centuries. More importantly, James added, it means an entire civilization has been suffering in isolation. They've watched us, helped us in ways we never knew, but couldn't reach out or connect. The head counselor's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. This revelation will shake the foundations of galactic society. Many will question why you remained hidden for so long. We had no choice, Reed responded. The quantum shift that saved us became encoded in our very being. We've been trying to find a way back ever since. Humanity finally gave us that chance. James stepped forward. We're not asking for the Council to immediately integrate the Veiled Ones into society. We're asking for acknowledgement of their existence, their rights, and their potential contributions to our shared future. The chamber had grown quiet, thousands of beings processing this fundamental shift in their understanding of reality. Reed could see the wonder, fear, and curiosity in their expressions, emotions she'd observed, but never been the target of before. Finally, the head counselor spoke. We will need time to verify your claims and understand the implications. But if what you say is true, this could be the greatest discovery since faster-than-light travel. All we ask is a chance, Reed said. A chance to be seen, to be heard, to be part of the galactic community. As the council began their deliberations, Reed looked at James and smiled. The truth was out now. There was no going back to the shadows. Whatever came next, her people would face it as visible, acknowledged beings. The quantum barrier that had isolated them for 5 millennia was finally beginning to crack. 1 year after the revelation to the Galactic Council, the Academy's Grand Hall was filled to capacity. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness a historic moment. The massive quantum resonance device hummed overhead, its field allowing everyone present to see the hundreds of veiled ones who had chosen to attend. Reed stood at the podium, James beside her, as she prepared to address the gathering. The past year had brought changes none of them could have imagined. Today marks the beginning of a new era, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. When the council acknowledged our existence, we feared the response. Instead, you welcomed us with open minds and hearts. The audience included many humans who had volunteered to help bridge the gap between the veiled ones and other species. Their natural ability to perceive quantum states had made them invaluable ambassadors. Our children now have a choice, Reed continued, gesturing to a group of young veiled ones playing with children from other species. They can live in the quantum state that protected our ancestors, or they can use the resonance technology to interact with the wider galaxy. Some of our people have chosen to remain unseen, and we respect that choice. Others have embraced visibility and begun sharing their knowledge. James stepped forward. The quantum communication network, developed from Reed's original research, has revolutionized interstellar travel and communication. But more importantly, it has helped us understand that consciousness itself is more complex and beautiful than we ever imagined. The head of the Academy rose to speak. In the past year, the Veiled Ones have helped us make advances in physics, medicine, and technology that would have taken centuries to achieve alone. Their unique perspective on quantum reality has opened doors we never knew existed. Reed watched as her people mingled freely with the crowd. Some flickered in and out of visibility, comfortable in both states of being. Others remained fully visible, eagerly sharing their experiences and knowledge. The quantum resonance devices are now standard equipment in major institutions, she explained. Any of our people can choose when and where to be seen. We are no longer trapped in isolation. A young Veiled One researcher demonstrated their latest discovery, a way to use quantum states to heal damaged tissue. Nearby, a group of scientists from various species collaborated on improving the resonance technology, making it more efficient and accessible. Humanity's role in this transformation cannot be overstated, Reed acknowledged. Their unique neural patterns showed us that different ways of perceiving reality could coexist. They taught us that being different didn't mean we had to be alone. James smiled. And your people taught us that there's always more to reality than what we can see. The universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered if we just learn to look with new eyes. The ceremony concluded with the activation of the new Quantum Integration Center, a place where Veiled Ones could safely transition between states of visibility, where their children could learn to control their quantum nature, and where all species could study and understand the quantum nature of consciousness. As the crowds began to disperse, Reed found a quiet moment with James. Did you ever imagine, that first day you saw me in the lab, that we'd end up here? Honestly. No, he laughed. I just knew I couldn't let you remain invisible and alone. Everyone deserves to be seen. Reed looked out at the mixing of species and cultures before them. Some of our elders still prefer the old way, remaining completely hidden. But they understand now that it's a choice, not a sentence. And the next generation will have options we never dreamed of, James added. They'll grow up knowing they can be part of both worlds. The quantum resonance field shimmered above them, a constant reminder of how far they'd come. Reed's people were no longer the ghosts of the galaxy, but active participants in its future. Their knowledge, preserved through millennia of observation, was finally being shared. The truth had not just set them free. It had opened up possibilities none of them had imagined. As Reed watched a group of children playing, shifting effortlessly between quantum states, she knew their ancestors' sacrifice had not been in vain. They had survived in shadows to emerge into a brighter future than they could have ever dreamed. The universe, they had discovered, had room for every state of being.